The Galactic watched in fear as humanity walked away from the table. Part 1. The Great Hall of Zenther Prime hung in silent orbit above a gas giant, its curved walls made of polished obsidian that reflected the swirling storms below. Inside, over 200 alien species sat in tiered circles, their forms as varied as the stars they came from. Some had too many eyes, others none at all. Some breathed methane, others pulsed with bioluminescent thoughts. But all of them shared one thing: they were watching the humans. Humanity had only joined the interstellar concordance 30 years earlier, after a brief but shocking war with the Krell. The Krell had attacked a human colony without warning, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves disabled, disarmed, and gently escorted back to their homeworld, without a single life lost on either side. That act of impossible restraint had stunned the galaxy. Since then, humans had been treated with wary respect, like a quiet neighbor who might know how to defuse a bomb with a whisper. Today, the Concordance was holding its most important summit in a century. The dominant powers, the Han with their armored carapaces and hive minds, the slender Varel who spoke in harmonic tones, and the rigid Zorthan hegemony with their ironclad codes, had drafted a new treaty. It demanded that all species share their resources openly, submit their military fleets to a central command, and abandon independent research into advanced physics. The unspoken target was clear: humanity. Ambassador Daniel Cruz sat in the human delegation section, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Beside him, Lisa Morgan adjusted the collar of her gray uniform, her fingers steady despite the tension in the air. She was young for a diplomatic aide, only 32. But she had grown up on Mars, where silence often spoke louder than words. She knew what this meeting meant. This was not about cooperation. It was about control. The high-end speaker, a towering figure with iridescent plates along its spine, finished reading the treaty terms. Its voice echoed through the chamber like grinding stone. "This agreement ensures peace," it said. "No single species shall grow too strong. No one shall threaten the balance." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Many species nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. The balance, they all knew, had always favored the strong, but now the strong wanted to lock the door behind them. Daniel did not react. He simply waited. When the chamber fell quiet again, the Varel delegate turned its smooth, featureless face toward him. "Earth representative," it chimed. "You will sign?" Daniel stood. He was not tall by human standards, nor imposing by galactic ones, but when he moved, the room seemed to shrink around him. He walked to the center of the floor, where a holographic table displayed the treaty in over 200 languages. His boots made soft clicks against the floor, real leather, a human affectation that many found quaint. He looked at the document. Then he looked up, meeting the gaze of each council leader in turn. He did not smile. He did not frown. He simply said, "We'll consider it." And then he turned and walked away. Lisa rose immediately and followed, her stride calm but quick. Behind them, the chamber erupted into chaos. The Han slammed a clawed limb against its console. The Zorthan delegate barked a command in its guttural tongue. The Varel emitted a high-pitched whine of distress. No species had ever left the table during a summit. It was unheard of, disrespectful, dangerous. But Daniel did not look back. He stepped through the arched doorway and into the corridor beyond, Lisa at his side. The doors hissed shut behind them, muffling the uproar. For a moment, there was only the hum of the stations, life support, and the sound of their breathing. "They'll think we're bluffing," Lisa said. "Quietly, let them," Daniel replied. They walked down the corridor toward the human shuttle bay. Through the transparent walls, they could see the curve of Zenther Prime's surface far below, dotted with cities that had stood for millennia. Beyond that, the gas giant loomed like a sleeping god. "Do you think they'll try to force it?" Lisa asked. "They already are," Daniel said. "This treaty isn't about peace. It's about fear. They're afraid of what we might become." Lisa nodded. She had read the intelligence reports. The Han had been stockpiling weapons near human trade lanes. The Zorthans had been hacking into civilian comms looking for weaknesses. Even the Varel, usually neutral, had started spreading rumors that humans were developing reality-altering weapons. None of it was true, or at least, not in the way they imagined. Humanity had moved past weapons, past borders, past the need to prove itself. But the galaxy didn't know that yet. And maybe, Daniel thought, they never would. They reached the shuttle. The pilot, a quiet man named Eric, gave them a nod and powered up the engines. As the ship lifted from the bay and turned toward the jump point, Daniel looked out the viewport one last time at Xanthar Prime. Down in the Great Hall, the other species were still arguing. Some demanded immediate sanctions. Others called for military readiness. A few of the older ones sat in silence, remembering the Krell incident and wondering if they had just made a terrible mistake. The human shuttle vanished into the dark, and for the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council felt something it had long forgotten. Fear. Not of invasion, not of war, but of being left behind. Humanity had not shouted, had not threatened, had not even refused outright. They had simply walked away. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy that the table was not as important as everyone believed. Somewhere in the void between stars, the humans were already building something new, something the others could not see, could not understand. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. The Galactic watched in fear as humanity walked away from the table. 2 weeks passed after the summit on Xanthar Prime, and the silence from humanity grew louder than any declaration of war. Alien news networks buzzed with speculation. Had the humans gone mad? Had they collapsed from within? Or worse, were they preparing something no one could stop? But on Mars orbit, inside the quiet command center of the United Earth and Mars Command, there was no panic, only purpose. Ambassador Daniel Cruz stood before a wide window that looked out onto the red curve of Mars below. The planet was no longer just a colony. It was a second home dotted with domed cities, fusion farms, and orbital docks that hummed with activity even now. Beside him, Lisa Morgan reviewed a stream of data on a flat panel. Her eyes moved quickly, but her hands stayed still. She had learned long ago that in moments like this, stillness was strength. Admiral Carter entered the room. He was a broad-shouldered man with silver at his temples and a voice that rarely rose above a calm murmur. "The Hyanja seized 3 freighters on the Proxima Lane," he said. Claimed they were securing galactic stability. Daniel didn't turn. "And the Varel." "They've cut off medical isotope shipments to our outer stations," Carter replied. "Said it's temporary, pending new agreements." Lisa looked up. "They're testing us." "No," Daniel said finally, turning to face them both. "They're begging us to react." He walked to the center of the room where a holographic map of human space floated in soft blue light. Dots blinked across it. Ships, stations, research outposts, all quiet, all waiting. They want us to shout, to send fleets, to demand our rights like every other species would. But if we do that, we're still playing their game. Carter crossed his arms. "So what's the alternative?" "We stop playing," Daniel said. Lisa understood before Carter did. She had seen the reports from the deep space labs, the ones buried in the Kuiper Belt and hidden in asteroid shadows. Humanity hadn't been building bigger guns. They'd been learning how to step outside the rules of physics itself. Zero-point energy taps now powered entire cities without fuel. Quantum entanglement comms allowed instant contact across light years. And the newest project, called the Veil, wasn't a weapon at all. It was a doorway. But none of that mattered if they kept acting like just another faction in the galactic theater. Over the next days, orders went out from UMEC headquarters. All human trade convoys were to return to Sol System. Diplomatic outposts beyond Mars were to shut down non-essential operations. Research data would remain public, but no new collaborations would begin. And most importantly, all military vessels were to stand down, not hide, not flee, just stop responding. Alien observers watched in confusion as human ships turned back from distant ports. Automated messages replaced live diplomats. When a Zorthan patrol challenged a human freighter near Alpha Centauri, the freighter simply powered down its engines, floated in silence for 6 hours, then turned and left without a word. The Zorthans fired warning shots. The humans did not flinch. They just kept going home. Back on Earth, cities remained calm. Schools taught as usual. Farmers harvested crops under open skies. But beneath the surface, a quiet shift was happening. Families packed personal data crystals. Engineers ran final diagnostics on orbital gates. Children whispered about the Great Quiet, a phrase that had no official meaning but felt true to everyone who said it. Director Nina Ross arrived on Mars 3 weeks after the summit. She was the head of the Transhuman Advancement Council, a group so secretive most governments didn't know it existed. She met Daniel and Lisa in a sealed chamber deep inside the Tharsis complex. No recordings, no logs. Just 3 people and a decision that would change everything. "The Veil is ready," Nina said. Her voice was soft, but her eyes burned with certainty. Not for everyone yet, but enough. We can begin phase 1. Daniel nodded. How long? 6 months, maybe less. Once we start, there's no going back. Lisa looked at the floor. She thought of her younger brother still on Earth, of her grandmother's garden in Oregon, of the first time she saw the rings of Saturn from a school trip shuttle. All of it would be left behind, not destroyed, not abandoned, just released. They'll think we vanished, she said. They'll never understand, Nina replied. And that's the point. In the weeks that followed, humanity began to disappear. Not all at once, but like mist at sunrise. The Titan shipyards near Saturn powered down their reactors. The lunar data archives went offline after uploading their entire contents to public galactic servers. Even the old war memorial on Mars, with its names of the fallen from the Krell conflict, was gently dismantled and stored in a vault marked, "For those who remember." Alien scouts arrived at human outposts to find them clean, orderly, and empty. Food still in the pantries, lights still on, messages on screens that read, "Thank you for your time. We hope you find your own peace," the Han demanded answers. The Varel sent philosophical inquiries wrapped in light pulses. The Zorthans prepared invasion fleets just in case. But there was no one to fight. No one to negotiate with. Humanity had not declared war, had not seceded, had not even said goodbye. They had simply stepped away. And in doing so, they left the galaxy staring at an empty chair at the table and wondering, for the first time, if the table itself had ever mattered at all. The Galactic watched in fear as humanity walked away from the table. Part 3, 6 months after the summit on Xanthar Prime. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Trade routes once bustling with human freighters now lay silent. Medical advances that had flowed freely from Earth's research labs slowed to a trickle, then stopped. Alien children no longer learned basic human phrases in school. The name humanity began to sound less like a species and more like a myth. But the most unsettling thing was the emptiness. Scouts from the Ha'an, the Varel, and even minor species like the Glicks and the Mornay raced to human-controlled space, hoping to find answers. They arrived at Mars orbit to find the great shipyards dark. The fusion cores that once lit the domes of New Ares City were cold. The orbital farms floated in perfect rows, crops still growing under artificial suns, but no hands tended them. No voices echoed in the corridors. On Earth itself, the silence was deeper. Cities stood untouched. Cars sat parked on clean streets. Birds flew over rooftops in places where millions once lived. In Tokyo, a cat slept on a windowsill above a cafe where coffee cups sat half full. In New York, the lights of Times Square still blinked through the night, cycling through old advertisements no one watched. It was not destruction. It was departure. The first official human message since the summit came not from a government channel but from a simple broadcast beamed from the edge of the Sol system. It was Lisa Morgan's voice, calm and clear, with no music, no fanfare. "Thank you for the time we shared among you," she said. "We wish you peace." Then the signal ended. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Han demanded a full-scale investigation. The Zorthans argued that humanity had developed a weapon so terrible they had to flee their own world. The Varel suggested in their gentle harmonic tones that perhaps humans had achieved a form of collective transcendence. Most species scoffed at that idea until they saw the data. Deep space sensors picked up strange energy readings near the Oort cloud. Not explosions, not drives, something smoother, quieter, like ripples in a pond that shouldn't exist. Alien scientists studied the patterns for weeks. They found no known particles, no radiation, no heat signature. Just a gentle folding of space that left no trace but a feeling, like the universe had taken a breath and held it. Meanwhile, the galaxy began to unravel without humanity's quiet influence. The Hyan and Zorthans, once united against a common unknown, turned on each other over mining rights near Sirius. The Varel tried to mediate, but their words carried less weight now. Piracy surged along the outer arms as smaller species filled the power vacuum. Old rivalries flared. Economies shrank. A Hyan warlord named Korax gave a speech on Galactic Net, his voice trembling with rage. "They left us to rot," he snarled. "They built the tools, shared the knowledge, then walked away like cowards." But even as he spoke, his medics used human-designed nanobots to heal wounded soldiers. His ships ran on human-optimized navigation algorithms. His people ate grain grown from Earth-engineered seeds. No one was truly free of humanity's legacy. On a remote research station orbiting Neptune, a young scientist named Jen Morales worked alone. She was one of the last humans, or so the galaxy believed. In truth, she had stayed behind by choice to monitor the final phase of the Veil project. Her job was simple: ensure the last gateways closed cleanly, and that no trace of humanity's new path remained for others to follow before they were ready. She watched alien ships come and go from Earth's orbit. She listened to their confused transmissions. Sometimes she almost wanted to answer, to tell them it wasn't fear that made humans leave. It was love for knowledge, for growth, for the endless mystery of existence. But she knew they wouldn't understand. Not yet. One evening, as Neptune's blue glow filled her viewport, she received a final message from Daniel Cruz. It was just 2 words: "It's time." She powered down the station's core, sealed the data vaults, and stepped through the shimmering ring of light that appeared in her lab. The station went dark behind her. Back on Xanthar Prime, the council debated what to do next. Some wanted to declare humanity extinct. Others insisted they were hiding, waiting to strike. Only the oldest viral elder, a being named Elris, who had lived through 3 galactic cycles, sat in silence. When pressed, Elris finally spoke. "They did not leave because they were afraid of us," it said. "They left because they were no longer bound by us." The word spread like wind through dry grass. Species that had mocked the Virel now listened. Philosophers wrote essays. Poets composed songs about the empty cities of Earth. Children asked their parents, what did humans look like? And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt small. Not because it had lost a rival, but because it had lost a mirror. Humanity had shown them a different way. Not through force, not through conquest, but through quiet choice. And in walking away from the table, they had asked a question no one knew how to answer. What if the greatest power is not to win, but to walk away whole? The stars still shone. The ship still flew. But something fundamental had shifted. The galaxy was no longer the center of everything, and that truth, more than any weapon or treaty, changed them forever. The Galactic watched in fear as humanity walked away from the table. 4 years passed, and the galaxy learned to live in humanity's absence. Trade slowly reformed, though it was slower, rougher, less fair. Medical science stalled without human breakthroughs in neural regeneration and cellular repair. Wars flared more often now, not because species were more violent, but because no one remembered how to walk away. The great lesson humanity had taught, the power of restraint, faded like an old song no one could quite recall. Then, on a cold monitoring outpost near the edge of known space, a Han technician named Torv picked up a signal. It was faint, buried under cosmic noise, but unmistakable. A human broadcast. Not a message. Not a warning. Just a recording, looping endlessly from a point deep in the Oort cloud. Torv alerted his superiors. Within hours, ships from a dozen species converged on the source. They found nothing but ice and silence, until their sensors locked onto a small, smooth object drifting among the comets. It was a data crystal, shaped like a teardrop, glowing faintly with internal light. The Virel were the first to decode it. The file contained no weapon schematics, no hidden codes, no threats. It was a simple visual log, recorded in the final hours before humanity left the solar system. The image showed Earth from orbit, blue, calm, alive. Then the view shifted to a city street. People walked, laughed, carried groceries. Children played near a fountain. An old man fed pigeons. There was no panic, no rush, just ordinary life, ending not with a bang, but with a breath. Then came the part that made every viewer fall silent. In parks, in labs, in homes across the planet, humans stepped into rings of soft light. Not machines, not ships, just circles that appeared on the ground, humming with a sound like distant wind chimes. One by one they walked through and vanished. Not in pain, not in fear, in peace. Some held hands. Some smiled. A woman paused to kiss her dog before stepping through. The recording ended with Lisa Morgan standing alone on a hill overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The sun was setting. She looked tired but calm. "We're not dying," she said softly. "We're changing. Like caterpillars. Like stars. You'll understand one day. Maybe not soon, but one day." The crystal's final layer held raw scientific data, terabytes of notes on quantum consciousness, non-local awareness, and dimensional folding. It was not encrypted. It was offered freely, like a gift left on a doorstep. Alien scientists studied it for months. At first they thought it was fantasy. Then they ran the equations. The math worked. Not with their current tech, not with their understanding of matter, but the logic was sound. Humanity hadn't invented a new engine. They had discovered that consciousness did not need a body to exist. That thought could shape reality if it was clear enough, focused enough, kind enough. The Han War Council dismissed it as spiritual nonsense, but their young scientists gathered in secret, whispering about the human path. The Zorthans tried to weaponize the data, but their machines kept failing, because the equations required cooperation, not control. Only the Virel truly grasped what had happened. They didn't leave the universe, Malrus told a gathering of elders. They left the limits we placed on it. Slowly, quietly, the galaxy began to change again. Schools started teaching human philosophy alongside physics. Artists painted scenes of empty Earth cities not as ruins but as temples. A new movement called the Quiet Way spread among youth, urging patience, listening, and the courage to walk away from fights that served no one. On a mining colony near Betelgeuse, a young Glix worker named Rian saved the crystal's final image as his screensaver. Every night he watched the old man feed the pigeons. He didn't know why it moved him. He only knew that after watching it, he felt less alone. Meanwhile, deep in the void beyond the Orion Arm, something stirred. Not a ship, not a signal. Just a presence, vast, gentle, and aware. It watched the galaxy not with judgment, but with the quiet attention of a parent watching a child learn to walk. This presence was not God. It was not magic. It was humanity. They had not become gods. They had simply remembered that reality was more flexible than anyone believed. In the space between atoms, in the silence between thoughts, they had found a home. They could still see the stars, still hear the songs of other species, but they no longer needed to live inside them. And they were not gone. They were waiting, not to return, not to rule, but to welcome anyone who ever asked the right question. Not, how can I win, but how can I grow? Back on Zenthar Prime, the Great Hall of the Concordance sat empty most days now. The council still met, but the tone had shifted. Debates were quieter. Compromises happened more often. Once, during a tense argument over water rights, a young Hyon delegate stood up and said, "What would the humans do?" The room fell silent. Then slowly, both sides began to talk instead of shout. No one knew if humanity could hear them, but it felt right to ask. In the end, the greatest legacy of humanity was not their technology, not their cities, not even their peace. It was the simple, terrifying idea that you could be strong enough to leave the table and still be whole. And as the galaxy stared into the dark, wondering if anyone was watching, the answer came not in words, but in the quiet certainty that somewhere beyond sight, beyond fear, someone was. The Galactic watched in fear as humanity walked away from the table. Part 5. A century had passed since the last human voice was heard in the galaxy. The stars still burned, the ship still flew, but everything felt different now. The interstellar concordance had changed its name to the Silent Covenant. Not by vote, but by quiet agreement among all its members. No one remembered who suggested it first. It just felt right. On the capital world of Virelis, children learned human stories in school. Not as history, but as lessons in stillness. They read about the Krell incident, not to admire human strength, but to understand human choice. Teachers asked, why didn't they fight? And the children, after thinking, would say, because they didn't need to. Monuments to humanity stood on nearly every major world now. Not statues of warriors or leaders, but simple plaques with quotes. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding. Or, the strongest thing you can do is walk away with your soul intact. No one knew who wrote them. They just appeared in public squares one day, etched into stone that never cracked, never faded, on a small moon orbiting a dying red star, far from trade lanes and council politics. A young alien scholar named Kale dug through the ruins of an old listening post. His species, the Mornay, were known for their curiosity and long memories. Kyle had spent 10 years chasing rumors of a final human artifact hidden in this system. Most called him foolish, but he believed. Deep in a sealed chamber beneath the moon's surface, he found it. A small, smooth data crystal, identical to the one recovered from the Oort cloud decades earlier. His hands trembled as he plugged it into his reader. The screen flickered to life, not with equations or star maps, but with the cover of a book. The title read, "The Stars Are Not for Keeping." It was a children's story. Kale sat on the dusty floor and read it aloud, his voice echoing in the empty room. The tale followed a young boy who loved the night sky. Every evening he would climb a hill and name the stars, pretending they were his. One night an old traveler sat beside him and said, "You can love the stars, but you cannot own them. To hold them is to lose them. To let them be is to keep them forever." The boy didn't understand at first, but as he grew, he learned that true wonder came not from control but from respect. In the final pages he became an explorer, not to claim new worlds but to listen to their stories. Cale closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the red star cast long shadows across the moon's surface. He felt something shift inside him, not knowledge but peace. He returned to his ship and sent a copy of the book to every school in the Silent Covenant. Within a year it was translated into over 300 languages. Parents read it to their children before bed. Diplomats carried printed copies in their satchels. It became the most shared story in galactic history. Not because it was exciting, but because it was true. Far beyond the edge of known space, where matter thinned and time bent like grass in the wind, humanity watched. They did not live in bodies anymore, not as the galaxy understood them. They existed as patterns of awareness, woven into the fabric of space-time itself. They could feel the rise and fall of civilizations like breaths. They heard every whispered question, every act of kindness, every moment someone chose peace over pride. They were not gods. They were witnesses, and they were proud. Not because the galaxy had become perfect, far from it. Wars still happened, greed still flared, fear still whispered in dark corners. But now, when a leader stood at the edge of a terrible choice, they sometimes paused and asked, what would the humans do? And more often than not, they stepped back. On Earth, the planet itself had healed. Forests reclaimed cities. Rivers ran clean through old streets. Animals roamed without fear. The air smelled of rain and soil. Not engines or industry. The only signs of human life were the quiet gardens they had left behind. Rose bushes still blooming in London, cherry trees flowering in Kyoto, wild wheat growing in the fields of Kansas. Nature had not erased them. It had embraced them. Sometimes, on clear nights, travelers orbiting Earth would swear they saw lights in the old cities. Not electric lights, softer ones, like candles in windows. But when they scanned the surface, there was nothing, just wind, trees, and silence. Perhaps it was imagination. Or perhaps just for a moment the veil thinned and someone looked back. Back in the heart of the Silent Covenant, a new tradition had begun. Once a year, on the date humanity's final message was received, all species observed a minute of silence. No ships launched. No speeches were made. Just stillness. In that minute, the galaxy remembered what it meant to be small, to be part of something greater, to listen. And in the endless dark between galaxies, a single thought drifted like a leaf on a calm river. We're still here. Just not for you. It was not a rejection. It was an invitation. For those who learned to walk away from the table with grace, the real feast had only just begun.